My name is Lily Brennan, and I was 20 years old when my grandmother died on a Thursday morning in September. By Friday afternoon, my stepmother had changed the locks on her house. I found out when I drove to Cliffside Road that evening to collect a few of my grandmother's things I had promised to keep safe. Her jewelry box, the photo albums from the hall closet, the small cedar chest she kept at the foot of her bed. My key did not work. I stood on the porch and tried it twice. Then I stepped back and looked at the door. Brand new deadbolt, shiny hardware. The kind you buy at a hardware store the same day you decide to do something you do not want anyone to stop. I called my father. He did not answer. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway for a long time. The oak tree in the front yard was starting to turn. The porch light was on. The house looked exactly the same as it always had from the outside. On the inside, something had already changed. I did not cry. I did not call again. I drove home, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I had an email from an attorney named Richard Colby waiting in my inbox. He had sent it 4 hours earlier. The subject line read, Ray Brennan Estate, important, time sensitive. My grandmother had been expecting this exact moment. She had prepared for it 3 years ago. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 8 years, to a summer afternoon at Cliffside Road, when my grandmother told me something I tucked away and did not think about again until the night I found a new lock on her front door. My grandmother's name was Ruth Brennan. She had lived in the house on Cliffside Road for 43 years. It was a white Craftsman with a wide front porch and window boxes she replanted every spring. The floors inside were original, dark walnut, worn smooth in the pathways between rooms. The kitchen had a window above the sink that looked out onto the backyard garden, and Ruth spent more hours at that window than anywhere else in the house, her hands in the soil or her eyes on whatever was growing. The summer I turned 12, my parents split up. My mother moved to be closer to her own family 3 states away. My father kept the apartment in town. I spent 6 weeks that summer at Cliffside Road while the adults figured out what the new arrangement would look like. Ruth did not treat those 6 weeks like a holding pattern. She treated them like time. We gardened every morning. She showed me which plants needed full sun and which ones wanted shade, and how to tell the difference between a weed and something worth keeping by the shape of the root when you pulled it. We painted the window boxes together, a deep blue she had chosen from a sample card she kept in her kitchen junk drawer for 2 years before she finally committed. This color waited long enough, she said when she finally opened the paint can. Good things are patient. Her house smelled like cut grass in the mornings and wood polish in the afternoons, and something sweet and clean in the evenings that I eventually understood was the white rose bush growing along the back fence. At lunch, we sat on the back porch with sandwiches and sweet tea, and she told me stories about her own mother, about the house before I was born, about what it meant to own something outright, to have worked for it and paid for it and made it yours by the labor of your own life. She said once, and I remember this clearly, people will always want what you have more than they want what they built. That's just human nature. The only protection against that is paper, legal paper, done right, done early. I was 12, I nodded politely. She looked at me over her sweet tea like she knew I didn't fully understand yet. You'll remember this when it matters, she said. She was right about that. The rest of that summer I learned the house, which windows stuck in the heat, which floorboard shifted near the bathroom door, where she kept the spare key, under the 3rd flagstone from the left on the garden path. Things you learn only when someone trusts you enough to teach them. My father eventually settled into a new routine. He started dating again within the year, nothing serious at first, then more serious. Then a woman named Sandra who had 2 kids of her own and a specific way of walking into rooms like she was assessing them. Ruth met Sandra twice during those years. She was polite. She was gracious. She was also watching. I noticed that she watched. My father married Sandra when I was 16. Ruth was not at the wedding. She sent a card and a gift and a handwritten note to my father that I never saw the contents of. When I asked her about the wedding afterward, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, I hope he chose someone who understands the difference between what's hers and what isn't. I asked what she meant. She changed the subject. I filed it away. Sandra moved into my father's apartment after the wedding, and within 6 months they had bought a house together, bigger, newer, in a neighborhood with good school ratings for her kids. My father seemed happy in the easy, surface way he had always seemed happy. Sandra decorated the new house quickly. She had opinions about everything. She was efficient in the way that people are efficient when they have already decided what they want and are simply executing the steps to get it. Ruth watched all of this from Cliffside Road and kept her thoughts to herself. But when I was 17, she did something I didn't find out about until 3 years later. She called Richard Colby. Richard Colby was an estate attorney whose office was 4 blocks from Cliffside Road. Ruth had known him for years. He had done basic legal work for her before. She called him in October, and she set up a series of meetings that ran through November and into the following January. I did not know about those meetings. I did not know that in January of the year I turned 18, Ruth Brennan placed the house on Cliffside Road and her savings account into an irrevocable trust. I did not know that she had the deed recorded under the trust at the county recorder's office. I did not know that she had named me, only me, as the sole beneficiary. I did not know that she had spent 3 months making it legally impossible for anyone else to claim what she had spent 43 years building. I found all of this out 3 years later. On the night I found a new lock on her front door. Ruth's health declined slowly, then quickly, the way these things often go. She was fine at Christmas. She was tired by spring. She was in the hospital by June and home again with a care schedule by August. My father took over her medical decisions. I visited every week. Sandra came twice, and both times she walked through the house in a specific way, not unkindly, but with that assessing quality she had, her eyes moving across the furniture and the built-ins and the window boxes as if she were counting things. Ruth watched her from her chair by the window. Ruth did not say anything. But one afternoon in late August, Ruth held my hand and said, "Lily, the house is yours, everything in it. Richard Colby has all of it. Call him after." I squeezed her hand. I told her not to worry about that now. She looked at me with the expression she used when she thought I was missing something important. "I'm not worried," she said. "I took care of it. I just need you to remember to call him." I said I would. She closed her eyes. She passed 3 weeks later on a Thursday morning, and on Friday afternoon her front door had a new lock. I opened Richard Colby's email at my kitchen table. He had reached out 4 hours after Ruth died. Before the day was over, before I had even thought about what came next, his email was 3 paragraphs. He introduced himself. He said Ruth had retained him 3 years earlier. He said there were documents that required my attention as soon as I was ready. He said timing was important and asked me to call him the following morning. I called him at 8 a.m. His voice was measured, professional. The kind of calm that comes from having these conversations many times. "Your grandmother came to me in October 3 years ago," he said. "She was very specific about what she wanted and very specific about why. She established an irrevocable trust. She placed the Cliffside Road property and her primary savings account into the trust at that time. The deed was recorded. The property has not been in Ruth Brennan's personal name for 3 years. It is trust property. It passed to you the moment she died, not through her estate, not through probate. Directly." I sat very still. "My stepmother changed the locks yesterday," I said. He paused. "I'm aware that the property may be accessed by other parties who believe they have a claim. They do not have a claim. But I need you to come in so we can move quickly." "What does moving quickly mean?" "It means we file a notice at the county recorder's office confirming the trust's legal interest in the property. Once that's filed, any action taken against the property, changing locks, removing assets, listing it for sale, becomes legally actionable. We also send formal notice to any parties who have accessed the property without authorization." "Sandra," I said. He did not confirm the name, but he said, "Whoever has accessed that property without legal standing will receive notice." I was in his office by 10 a.m. Richard Colby had a clean desk, 2 chairs, and a folder with my grandmother's name on the tab. He opened it and set the documents in front of me the way someone sets down something they have been keeping safe for a very long time. My grandmother's signature on the trust document, dated 3 years ago, my name on the beneficiary line, the property address, the savings account number, a summary page that listed everything the trust held. "Your grandmother was very clear in her instructions," Richard said. "She said, and I'm reading from my notes, Sandra will want the house. She will move on it fast. Make sure Lily is protected before Sandra knows there is anything to protect." The room was quiet. I looked at the document. "She knew," I said. 3 years ago she already knew. She knew the dynamics of your family," Richard said carefully. "She planned accordingly." He slid a single page across the desk. I need your signature on the acceptance documents. You're the successor trustee. Once you sign, the trust is fully active under your management. I file the notice this afternoon. I signed. He filed by 2 p.m. Have you ever had someone protect you before you knew you needed protecting? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. The formal notice reached Sandra 2 days later. I know this because my father called me that evening. His voice had the specific quality of someone who has been surprised by information he probably should have anticipated. Emma, he started, then corrected himself. Lily, I need to understand what's happened with your grandmother's house. I know, I said. I've been waiting for you to call. We met at Richard's office 3 days after the funeral. My father and I sat across from Richard at his desk. Sandra had asked to come. My father had told her this was a family conversation first. I thought that was the first reasonable decision he had made in several days. Richard walked him through everything. The trust, the timeline, the Ray recorded deed, why the property had never been part of Ruth's estate, why the locks Sandra had changed were on a property she had no legal standing to enter. My father was quiet through most of it. Then he said, she never told me. Richard said she made a considered decision. She was protecting Lily. That was her primary concern. My father looked at his hands. He looked at me. I kept my expression even. I kept my voice calm. She told me 3 weeks before she died, I said. She said the house was mine and to call Richard after. I thought she was being sentimental. She was being precise. He nodded slowly. He looked like a man doing difficult arithmetic. After the meeting, he drove home. I drove to Cliffside Road. A locksmith Richard had arranged met me there. Within 40 minutes, the new deadbolt Sandra had installed was replaced. The original lock was back. My key worked. I stood on the porch for a long time after the locksmith left. The oak tree in the front yard was deep in fall color now. The window boxes still had the last of the summer flowers in them. The porch light came on automatically at dusk. Everything looked exactly the same as it always had, because it was. Nothing had actually changed. Not legally. Not in any way that mattered. Sandra had changed a lock on a house that was not hers and had not been for 3 years. All she had done was confirm what my grandmother already knew about her. Sandra and my father's marriage did not survive the following year. I don't say that with satisfaction. I say it because it is what happened. The house on Cliffside Road was the first thing Sandra wanted and could not have. It was not the last disagreement they had. But it was the one that showed my father something about her that he could not unsee once he had seen it. They separated quietly. No dramatic confrontation. Just the slow unwinding of 2 people who had wanted different things all along. Sandra moved out. My father kept the house they had bought together. He downsized a year later. He calls on Sundays now. He came to help me repair the window boxes last spring. He got dirt on his hands and didn't mention it, and we planted the same deep blue flowers Ruth always chose. We don't talk about that year very much. But sometimes he stands on the back porch and looks at the garden and he has the expression of someone who is finally understanding something he should have understood a long time ago. I think that is enough. I still live part of the year at Cliffside Road. The walnut floors. The window above the kitchen sink. The white rose bush along the back fence that blooms every June without being asked. I replant the window boxes every spring. The same deep blue she chose from a sample card she kept in her junk drawer for 2 years. Good things are patient. She told me that the summer I was 12. She meant the paint color. She also meant herself. She also meant the trust document she would sign 6 years later. She also meant me, sitting on her back porch eating a sandwich and learning the shape of a root, and not yet understanding that she was already building something I would one day need. I understand it now. Ruth Brennan did not leave me a house. She left me 43 years of careful decisions. 43 years of doing things right and doing them early and making sure the people she loved would be standing on solid ground when the people who weren't couldn't touch them. She left me the proof that someone had looked ahead, far ahead, and made sure I was already protected before I knew there was anything to protect. My stepmother changed the locks on a house that hadn't belonged to anyone but me for 3 years. That was her first mistake. It was also her last. If you have ever had someone in your life who protected you quietly, who planned for you before you knew you needed a plan, I want to hear about them. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story stayed with you, subscribe. There are more to come, more stories about women who planned ahead, who did the quiet work, who made sure the people they loved would be standing on solid ground. Ruth Brennan was one of them, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knew it was worth it. There is something I want to tell you about the week after the locks were changed, because I think it is the part of this story that stays with me most. The morning after I met with Richard Colby, before the notice had reached Sandra, before my father had been told anything, I went back to Cliffside Road. I parked at the end of the driveway. I did not go to the door. I just sat and looked at the house. I thought about the summer I was 12, about the 6 weeks I had spent there while my parents figured out their new arrangement, about how Ruth had never once made me feel like a complication or an inconvenience, about how she had handed me a trowel and shown me the difference between a weed and something worth keeping and made me feel like the work we were doing together mattered. I thought about the afternoon she said, "People will always want what you have more than they want what they built." I had been 12 and polite, and I had nodded and not really understood. But sitting in that car, looking at the new lock on her front door, I understood. She had been watching Sandra for years. She had been watching the way Sandra moved through rooms and assessed what was in them. She had been watching my father's ease with her and his blindness to what that ease was costing him. She had been watching all of it from her chair by the window with her cup of tea and her characteristic quietness. And 3 years before she died, she had driven 4 blocks to Richard Colby's office and made sure that none of it would matter. Not because she hated Sandra. I do not think Ruth Brennan wasted much energy on hate. But because she loved me, and love, the serious kind, the kind that lasts and holds and means something, love plans ahead. It does the paperwork. It records the deed. It sends an email to the attorney before the day is even over. It makes sure the right name is on the right document before anyone thinks to look. That is what she gave me, not just a house, a foundation, evidence. The proof in legal ink that I was chosen and protected and thought of carefully, specifically, years in advance, by someone who saw what was coming and made sure I would be standing when it arrived. I sat in the car until the sun moved behind the oak tree. Then I called Richard Colby and told him I was ready. And I was. I want to ask you something before I go. Have you ever looked back at something someone did for you, something quiet, something you didn't fully understand at the time, and realized how much further ahead they were looking than you knew? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear about the people who planned for you before you knew you needed a plan. I read every single one. And if Ruth Brennan's story and my grandmother's house, and the simple, powerful truth that preparation is a form of love, if any of that stayed with you today, then subscribe. Hit the bell. Come back next week, because there are more stories where this one came from, more women who did the quiet work, more families where someone paid attention when everyone else was looking the other way, more moments where a legal document said what words alone never could. The house on Cliffside Road still stands on its original foundation. The window boxes are full every spring. The white rose bush blooms every June without being asked. And the lock on the front door, the right lock, the one that has always been mine, opens with a key my grandmother put in my hand a long time ago. She just wanted to make sure I knew how to use it.